Hi again, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're going to talk about best practices in marketing your podcast. Before we start, I want to give you a little bit of backstory on me. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years, and I've also moved into doing marketing consulting, and I launched my own podcast about 6 months ago. So I'm pretty much new in this. Who has their own podcast? Who's thinking about doing their own podcast? Who wants to do a podcast but is afraid to start their own? Who is intimidated by starting their own podcast? Exactly. I can tell you it's a lot easier. Believe me, if the schmuck like me can do it, anybody can do it, believe me. Okay. But you already know why we're here, so we'll skip that slide. Okay. Who knows what movie that's from? Exactly. Why do I have that? I have that because if you start a podcast, doesn't mean everybody's going to come running and subscribe and download your podcast. It doesn't work that way. I wish to God it did. Lord knows I wish it did, because it'd be a lot easier for all of us to just set up shop, do a podcast, and everybody comes, subscribes, everybody shares, everybody likes, comments, downloads. But of course, it doesn't work that way. So the first thing to understand is discovery versus relationship. So what do I mean by that? Podcast doesn't have an inbuilt discovery. Like we said, it just doesn't set up shop and everybody comes running. Everybody comes to your cornfield. It just doesn't work that way. So you have to use other platforms to draw people to the show, which is your relationship platform. So your show, think of your show as the relationship platform. Okay. So let's get into some tips here. Best ways to get your podcast discovered, which is really, really the most important thing here, is get people to notice and go and then start sharing and go, holy shit, did you hear that podcast? That is, by the way, if I offend anybody, I'm sorry. I'm from the East Coast. I have no filter, so forgive me. You're from Philly? I'll give you the heads up right now. I have zero filter. Okay. Podcast aggregators and directories. Does everybody knows what they are? So there's platforms and aggregators and directories that you basically put it to one and it pushes it out to all the different platforms, right? Before we go on, one important key point here is, how do I say this? I host my own podcast. I do not do any of the back end stuff. I'm the pretty face. I know it's frightening. It's hard to be this good looking, but I have a producer who does all the back end stuff for me, but I know enough about it to how to market your podcast. So aggregators and directories, get it onto those platforms that could just, you push one button literally and it goes out to all the different Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, all the usual suspects. Guest on other people's show. So those of you who have your own podcast, can you raise your hand again? Have you ever tried to be on someone else's podcast? Do that. Whatever your niche is, don't look at them as competition. Look at them as helping you, and then offer to have them on your show as well. So then you leverage their audience while they leverage your audience. It's a bit of a misnomer, right? Because you think, why would I go on someone else's podcast who's trying to get the same listeners I am? But if they already got more listeners than you do, say, hey, I'd love to come on your show and tell you about my new show. You'd be surprised the response you get. You really would. And at the end of the day, what's it hurt to ask? The most they can do is say no. Clips. No, I'm not on repeat. Clips. Video. You have to capitalize on it. Now, if you go like me, my podcast is audio only. Okay, so how do we do video clips? Well, you can use certain things like SoundCloud and sound bites and make like visual sound clips, if you will. Know what they are? It's real easy to do. You can make video of sound clips. That makes sense? Or even just static images of the person you host with a quote. Just do something visual. We're a visual people. Everybody likes visual, right? You got to be able to see something versus just a sound clip. I cannot tell you how important that is. It's ungodly important. We talked about this. Leverage not only someone else's show, but your guest audience. My show is all about marketing and advertising. And recently I had on the CMO of MasterCard. It's huge, right? Well, I had MasterCard pimp out, that come out right? Share the episode with the CMO. I get it. Not everybody has access to the CMO of the Chief Marketing Officer of MasterCard, but leverage your guest audience. Ask them to share. Don't just have somebody on and go, thanks for coming, drive safely, have a nice life. No. But also make it easy for them to share. What do I mean by that is give them copy paste. Just write up something for them to go, just hey, can you do me a favor and share this? You write it for them. They just copy paste, boom. With a link, with a hashtag. What does that take? All they have to do is literally copy paste. It's so simple, but we're all so busy. If you ask someone just to share something, they're going to go, sure. Are they going to get around to it? Maybe. But if you put in front of them 3 different types of copy, can you just pick one and copy and paste this? Sure. Right? So just make it easy for somebody to share the episode that they're on. Repurpose. Oh my gosh. So the marketer in me goes, yes, anytime you have content, repurpose. So what do I mean by that when it comes to a podcast? Turn it into a blog post. You interview somebody. Here's the highlights of the interview from my CMO for MasterCard. That's one blog post. Share out sound clips like we just talked about on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or whatever the hell it's called now. Share it on there. Right? Repurpose. You have so much content when you interview somebody or when you just do your own podcast. The people who do podcasts, do you have guests on? Who has guests on, right? Okay. And you don't have to. You can just do your own, but you have so much content that you're sitting on, you don't even realize it. Because you do it and then you move on to the next episode, right? But you can repurpose everything you've done. And then when you get done, say 5 episodes, here's my top 10, top 10 moments from my first 5 episodes. Then you do the same thing after you do 5 more episodes. Here's my greatest hits. Everything that you've done can be and should be repurposed constantly. Because you never know when someone's going to hear it, right? You put it out to the world once or twice. Well, if it doesn't hit their feed, they're never going to see it. So just keep repurposing everything that you have. Convert the audio to a YouTube video. Does anybody do that who has their own podcast? It's really easy, right? So if you don't know what that is, you can take your RSS feed, upload it to YouTube. I think it's YouTube. There's a word for it. I can't remember what type of YouTube it is, but it's so easy. I did this one myself. I was very proud of myself. It's really easy. You do it once. You just do it once. And every time you kick out a new episode, it automatically publishes to YouTube. You set up a YouTube channel. You put in the RSS feed. Every new episode automatically gets fed. So you literally have a YouTube video of your podcast. And we all know YouTube, right? Talk about SEO. Why would you not put it up on YouTube? It's free. That's all I need to hear, right? Prompt. This may be the most overlooked thing for podcast. It's in the marketing world, it's like call to action. Has anybody ever heard of a call to action? That's what that is. But it's so simple. You'd be amazed how I listen to podcasts and they go, thanks. See you next time. No. Give them that little not so gentle nudge. Hey, subscribe, download, share. You'll be amazed how much that does for you. Because you're just constantly reminding people, thank you for listening. Hey, if you're up for it, if you're so inclined, do me a favor, subscribe to this, download this, share this. I'll be your best friend. Well, you don't have to include that. But something like that, just prompt them to share. For those of you thinking of starting, when you start, launch at least 3, have 3 episodes in the can. I forget who was thinking about doing their own podcast here, but have at least 3 done. The first thing when I hired a producer, he told me, get at least 3 recorded. And he was right, because now I'm constantly ahead. I'm 5 or 6 episodes ahead at any given time. So you're not scrambling if you have guests on, or you're not scrambling to record an episode. So get at least 3 in the can before you launch. Okay? If you can do more, great, but get at least 3 in the can so that when you go to launch, you're always ahead, because then you're constantly recording on top of those other ones. Okay, now get people, keep people listening. I put the little asterisk in because I didn't want to offend anybody with that letter that's not there, but I think we can all figure out what that letter is. But it's so obsessed over the details. If you're recording something and it doesn't come out right, start again. Does anybody record live their podcast? Okay. That's a bit of an issue. But I also say be honest and be transparent. If you're recording live and you screw up and go, you know what? I screwed up. We're going to start again. People love transparency. People love real, authentic conversations. Be real. Don't go back and start. I don't know how you are, but just keep it real. If you screw up, you screw up. Trust me. Screwed up many, many times. But it's endeared me to so many people because I'm just authentic. So if you're doing it live and you screw up, own it. But if you're recording, just start again. Keep going. You can edit it out. It's not the end of the world. Just keep going. Hold on. I just interviewed somebody who had a technical difficulty. Hold on. Let me ask that question again. My editor cleans it up. You never know. If you're having a guest on, you've got to know your guest. You've got to do prep. You can't just have somebody on. I never have a guest on who I don't meet first, at least for 15 minutes. I never want to have a guest on cold. I need that comfort level. I think it's so important to just have that relationship and understand who they are, not just professionally, but who they are personally. Find out about them. Do some of your diligence. What are they into? You can find that out. Everybody's got a digital footprint, right? You can find that out. So a quick story on that one. I had the vice president of marketing from Subaru on recently. And I found out that in 1967, when Subaru of America opened their first office, the Beatles released the song, All You Need Is Love. Well, if anybody knows Subaru, the word love is inherent in everything they do. I told him this. He had no idea. He was shocked. He goes, that's true, Steve? I said, yeah, because I looked it up. I wanted to find out a little more about the brand, a little more about him. So I discovered in 1967, the Beatles released All You Need Is Love. It was the same year Subaru of America opened their first office. You don't think he totally loved that? What did that take me? 5 minutes on a Google search? Come on. There's no reason not to do that. Talk to your audience. It's no different than any brand doing consumer research. Talk to your audience. Ask them what they like. Ask them what they don't like. Ask them what's working. Hey, am I talking too much when I interview somebody? Hey, are they too long? Are they too short? Now, Lord knows you can't please everybody. Please know that going in. My interviews probably between 35 and 40 minutes. Those are how long my episodes are. And I try to keep them in that length. But I'm constantly asking my listeners, what do you like? What don't you like? What are some questions I didn't ask? Right? So constantly, it's no different than you are a brand. By the way, everybody does know that, right? Not to change subject, but everybody in this whole we're all a brand. Not to go down that path. But every one of us is a brand. And once you understand that, then you're no different than Nike, McDonald's, Apple, or anybody else. So you talk to your customers, find out what they want, what they don't want. Okay, Steve, it's time for the cliche of all cliches. Here's the thing about cliches, by the way. They only become cliches because they're said so many times. Think about it. When you get to that vaulted status of a cliche, it's because it's been said so many freaking times. Be yourself. I am the living embodiment of being yourself. Trust me. Be yourself. I'm a college dropout. I've never taken a writing course in my life, and I made it into Forbes. I just be myself. When someone comes on my show, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to anybody. Everybody gets treated the same. I talk to every single person. Don't try to be something you're not. I know. I don't know when I'm morphed into Tony Robbins. I'm sorry. But just be yourself. Let your personality come through. It will endear you. Trust me. To every single person. So I'm way ahead of schedule. I want to open this up to questions. That's why I wanted to get through this. I want all questions. I don't know if we have another mic. Do we have another mic? I'm sorry. I'm hitting you on the spot here. But I want to have an open dialogue. Ask me anything. I'm an open book. You want to know about my divorce? I'll tell you that. Whatever you want to know. Where have we a question? Right here.
So the first question I have is name. I know quite a bit about marketing and sales as well. Yeah. So how did you choose your name so that it optimizes, the SEO for that?
Yeah.
And I'd like to know that.
So you're talking about the CMO Whisperer?
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm talking about how you chose your name, the name of your podcast. Right. How do you recommend choosing your own name to maximize your?
So my name is my show. It's the CMO Whisperer Show. So that was given to me by the CMO of Walmart about 15 years ago. And it's just because I've gotten to know so many chief marketing officers and coach and counsel them. She just said it in passing, kind of like, Steve, you're like the CMO Whisperer. And it just stuck. And that's how I arrived at my show. I was already being that persona, right? But if you're trying to think of a name of your show, I get it. You could go down 50 different rabbit holes and plug in all those podcast name generators and go crazy. And it's not easy to do sometimes. And the best advice I can give you, unlike me, who had my name kind of thrust on me, is come up with about 5, right, that you feel comfortable with, and put it in front of maybe 3 to 5 other people. Because the more people you ask, the more different answers you're going to get. So if you have 3 to 5 people that you can bounce the possible name off of, the ultimate is up to you. And I know this is another cliche, but it's how you brand it. Right? So I don't like to get too bogged down in what name versus that name. Come up with your name that you think best exemplifies who you are and the show that you're doing, and then just go with that. Does that make sense? Not like a cop out, but once you just brand the out of it. Good question though. Over here.
Hello. Yes. I want to ask you, what was your opinion versus an audio podcast versus a visual podcast? Yeah. And when you talk about how you pushed your audio podcast to YouTube, did that include any visuals?
Great question. So the most direct and honest, because that's all I do, it's cheaper to do audio only podcast. It just is. So when I launched it, it was going to be audio only just because of a budgetary constriction I had. You can do both, obviously. It's just a little more involved in terms of editing on the back end. I just found it easier. Plus the fact that, does anybody really want to see this every day on every episode? Probably not. But no, it is cheaper. As far as YouTube, the way it gets uploaded is it'll just bring in like a static image of your logo, and then it's all audio. That makes sense? Okay. Thank you. Good question.
How have you found it do you have any suggestions for leveraging authenticity when you have a corporate-focused podcast or a corporate-branded podcast?
Great. So I've spent time at Oracle, so I know about the corporate dance, if you will, and the restrictions and limitations. That's number one is how much you have to deal with internally. Like if you work for a big company, if they have really strict, understand you got to know the rules of each company. So if they have limitations, you have to play in those rules, right? But even when you have to play in the parameters of those rules, you can still always be yourself. You may not be able to ask the questions you want to ask or really go deep and get like behind the curtain kind of thing. But I don't care where you're at, who you're working for, what you're doing. You're never going to compromise who you are. Otherwise, if you're under restriction for a big company, for example, and they say, well, you have to speak in this tone, that may be extreme, or you have to be this kind, then you know what? I'm not doing it. That's just me. I can't do that. I can't compromise who I am. So we can talk offline if you want. I'd love to hear more work because I was at Oracle. So I get the big corporate, big brother, right? That kind of, okay. I think we hit over here. Oh, same question. Okay.
Okay. So the other couple I have is, I'd like to know from beginning to end for each podcast, what's the time it takes you? Then monetization. What's your plan for each monetization of each podcast and how much does it cost you to produce it?
Yeah.
So those are.
So great questions. So I block an hour for each episode for each guest. The actual recording, the interview is about 40 minutes. The reason I block an hour is for any technical difficulty. Just, you never know. Someone's running late. Someone has an issue. That's that. So it's about 40 minutes. As far as monetization. Yeah. Oh.
I don't mean just the time for the podcast.
Okay.
I mean, looking for your person who you're going for.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of back end in all our creation.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can become a part-time job.
Yes.
And all we have is 24 hours in a day. So I'm curious, is it worth it for whatever your intention is with it? And part of mine is time.
So remind me, hold the mic 1 second. Have you launched your own show yet?
I've done other audio productions and other trainings online, so I'm very familiar with how much production takes. I haven't done podcasts, and that's one of the reasons I haven't.
Right.
Is I'm curious how much it's going to really take in time and energy, and what the cost would be to outsource other elements of it, and then the monetization on the other side of it.
So my situation is a little different in that I had the Forbes background, so I had a big network to draw on for guests. So I get it. I've been blessed to have that kind of starting ahead of the curve kind of thing, as far as having a stable of people who I could have on my show. But what I found was once I launched, within a month or two, people started coming to me. Like, hey, I saw your show, or I heard about your show, or I saw it on, it doesn't matter where, you'll start getting pitched for people to want to come on your show. So it's kind of they'll do it for you. The problem is up front, how much time you spend. That all depends on your niche, but drawing people you already know. That's the simplest, most direct answer I can give you is draw on your existing group and ask them to come on, assuming they're part of what you want to talk about in the first place. Right. And as far as costs go, you can outsource it. I don't have to do that. I'm blessed to not have to do that. My episodes, the episode, is around $400 per episode. My producer charges, which is really cheap. I have a really good relationship with my producer, but it's around $400 soup to nuts that he charges me per episode. Did I answer everything?
Yeah. Are you doing it for I can sit there and have a hobby all my life, but if I'm doing it for, like, what is the purpose of these different podcasts?
And it's a great question. So I'm just beginning to monetize, and I'm going to be putting out merch with my logo on it and hats and shirts and all those good things, and then start looking for advertisers and sponsors. I'm not there yet with my reach, and I think we're up against it, but that makes sense. Okay. And anybody who wants I'll be sticking around. So anybody wants to come up, I'm happy to talk to anybody, but I think we're out of time, right? We're out of time. Listen, thank you so much, everybody. I'm around. Please come up and talk to me. Thank you.